Welcome to another edition of Diplomatic Channel. I'm Amarachi Ubani. This week on the program, peace seems in jeopardy in Gaza after the Israel Defense Forces said on Sunday it carried out airstrikes on Rafah after an attack by Hamas on its troops in Gaza. The IDF says this is a bold violation of the ceasefire. Hamas, on the other hand, says it is not aware of clashes in Rafah. And as protests continue over the situation in Gaza, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced his government's approval to rename the October 7 war in Gaza to the War of Revival. Our interview feature this week is of the UNDP resident representative in Nigeria, Ms. Elsie Attafuah, during her most recent visit to Channels Television. You see, the UNDP and Channels Television have signed a memorandum of understanding to enhance the agency's agenda for sustainable development in Nigeria. The fruit of the partnership will be seen through impactful, cost-effective advocacy, public engagement, digital content on development issues, and success stories to promote peace, unity, and prosperity. I got to chat with her about these and a whole lot more about the UNDP's work in Nigeria. But first, a quick check on other discussions in diplomatic circles. We'll be right back after.
Ceux qui prétendent être neutres, soit n'ont absolument rien compris.
Burkina Faso's President Ibrahim Traoré has called for a continent-wide awakening, stressing that Africa has no choice but to embark on a revolution for development and unity in the face of what he described as imperialist maneuvers.
Et en tant que révolutionnaire, un révolutionnaire aime tous les peuples. Merci donc à vous qui êtes venus.
Speaking at a forum in Ouagadougou to a Pan-Africanist delegation, he said those who claim to be neutral have either understood absolutely nothing or their brains may be switched off. Neutrality is not an option.
Et ces idées, on a tenté de détruire toutes les archives.
The Burkinabe leader criticized African heads of state, who, he said, hide behind a so-called African-made democracy, perhaps trying to imitate their imperialist masters.
Toutes les boîtes d'archives ont été vidées, essayé d'effacer totalement.
He urged the creation of a distinctly African model and a break with the organizations and institutions they helped to establish in our states.
La chair s'en est allée, mais l'esprit demeure sur le monde.
My wish would have been that it's President Zelensky who meets Putin, because it's actually them who have to agree on this.
EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas said on Monday that she expects the 19th sanctions package against Russia to be approved this week. According to her, it's not nice to see President Vladimir Putin travel to Budapest to hold a meeting with US President Donald Trump about Ukraine. Kallas was asked by a journalist ahead of a foreign ministers meeting in Luxembourg. It comes after US President Donald Trump announced on Thursday that he would meet with the Russian leader in Budapest, following what he described as a very productive phone call about ending the conflict in Ukraine. Hungary's Viktor Orban has repeatedly called for peace talks, contrasting his own position with that of Brussels and the bloc's ongoing arms shipments to Ukraine.
Regarding Budapest, no, it's not nice. I mean, to see that really a person put to the arrest warrant by the ICC is coming to a European country. And again, you know, the question is whether there's any outcome out of this. This is, I think, what we need to see, how these things are going in Budapest, as we have been very firm that Russia only negotiates when they are put under pressure. So we hope that also President Trump does that.
Welcome back. People living in Gaza are afraid the much-awaited peace agreement between the IDF and Hamas will not last. Given the recent fightings in Rafah and other parts of Gaza, Hamas is rejecting claims of breaching the ceasefire agreement, instead accusing Israel of multiple breaches. Doctors in Al-Aqsa Hospital say at least 3 people were killed by an Israeli airstrike in Nusrat in central Gaza as of Sunday afternoon. The report was confirmed by Gaza's Hamas-run civil defense. It followed a separate strike on the town of Al-Zaweda, also in central Gaza. Observers say the ceasefire agreement between Hamas and Israel has reached critical moments. The Israel Defense Forces say Hamas fired an anti-tank missile and gunfire towards IDF troops near Rafah, but the militant group says it is unaware of any clashes there. Israel defends its attacks in Rafah, saying they were in response to the Hamas attacks. Hamas is attempting to shore up its weakened rule, rejecting claims of breaching the ceasefire agreement and accusing Israel of multiple breaches. The Israeli far-right, on the other hand, is using the moment to call for a full resumption of the war. U.S. President Donald Trump, who helped broker the peace deal, has over the last few days talked tougher about Hamas and Gaza. On Thursday, he told reporters that if Hamas does not behave, in his words, we'll take care of it. His remarks followed reports of gang clashes in Gaza following the first phase of the peace deal.
We're going to find out if they behave. If they behave good, if they don't behave, we'll take care of it.
Earlier in the week, he was asked about disarming Hamas.
We have told them we want to disarm, and they will disarm. And if they don't disarm, we will disarm them. And it'll happen quickly and perhaps violently.
On the sidelines, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Sunday afternoon told a cabinet meeting the government has approved his proposal to rename the October 7 war in Gaza to the War of Revival. He recalled the 12-day war in June against Iran, which was dubbed with the strength of a lion. He explained its name was meant to emphasize the noble purpose rooted in our heritage. A people like a lion will rise. Meanwhile, across Europe, activists have voiced anger, accusing Israel of multiple ceasefire violations and worsening the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. They followed Israel's decision to keep the Rafah crossing closed until further notice, a move that has halted the entry of aid and the evacuation of civilians from the enclave. Resident representative of the United Nations Development Programme here in Nigeria, Elsie Attafuah, is very excited about the agency's partnership with Channels Television. Both will be producing impactful, cost-effective advocacy, public engagement, digital content on development issues, and success stories to promote peace, unity, and prosperity. In the end, Nigeria wins, as this will help change the narrative about Nigeria and Africa. With us, the storytellers telling the stories of our continent. She said a whole lot in my conversation with her. Elsie Attafuah, thank you for joining me today, and welcome again to Channels Television.
Well, thank you very much, Amarachi. I think the first time I spoke with you, I think was virtual, so this is the first time we're meeting physically.
Well, so how are you enjoying Nigeria?
Well, first of all, let me thank Channels for having me here. I just had a meeting with Dr. Momo and the entire leadership team to appreciate him for his vision and passion and really promoting the development outcomes. So first of all, a big thank you to him and the team here, but also to appreciate the people of Nigeria. I've been here for 1 year, 7 months. It feels like 4 years already. I've been warmly welcomed by the people of Nigeria. I want to thank His Excellency the President and the Vice President, everybody who has welcomed me, a daughter of the soil from next door Ghana. So it's been great. I've been traveling the country, transversing every place, meeting with leaders, young people, enjoying good food. So Nigeria is home. And as you say, we know they carry last. So I'm here to stay, and I'm happy, and I can see that Nigeria is blessed, and there's a lot going on in the country. Truly happy to be part of the reforms going on in the country and to accompany it.
You might also want to add that you're enjoying our jollof rice, right?
Well, you know, Marachi, I thought you would try to avoid this controversial one, but I think Hilda Basi actually sealed it. She cooked the biggest pot of jollof rice the other day and went into the Guinness Book of Records. So I think she won in favor of Nigeria. So all hands up Ghanaians now. Nigeria has won the day.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for putting that out there. Yes. And we appreciate our Ghanaian brothers, of course. They're invited to eat the jollof rice whenever they want. But let's talk about why you're here in Channels TV. You just signed an MOU with the Channels Television. This is about telling African stories. Could you explain a bit more about that?
Well, first of all, thank you. It's been a historic day that we as UNDP signed an agreement with Channels Television. And just to put it in context, and that's one of the reasons why we are partnering. We are in a world of uncertainty. We have, conflicts, wars, name it, but also great times of opportunities. We've seen young people innovating like never before. We've seen transformation in demography. We've seen people also, influencing through their ideas, their narratives, and their values. And we feel that the role of the media in times like this is very pivotal. So the MOU is nothing but to work around and, three, I would say, areas of work. First of all, amplify the voices of what Nigerians are doing. And Nigerians are doing great things, whether it's in the music industry, whether it's in fashion, tourism, but somebody needs to amplify that voice. Where are those innovations and how can we tell the story in a very powerful way? I was just telling him just recently, a moment ago, that, when we do calls for proposal, we have about 9,000 Nigerians who have ideas. How do we take their stories forward? That's one. The second one is also to really shape public narratives. We are in times of uncertainty, as I said, and it matters what we think. And so how do we use, expert dialogues? How do we use investigative journalism to really shape the discourse around the sustainable development goals, why they matter, and what we need to do to collectively achieve greater outcomes. And I think finally also, we have to look at the future of development. We have, artificial intelligence now. How do you build and create the next generation of development communicators like you? What would it look like? So we're also talking about potentially looking at an innovation center here in Channels where we can groom the next generation of development communicators. So really, we are here to partner to support Nigeria's development agenda, tell the story in a very powerful way, influence the outcomes positively, but also we want to start a whole conversation around Niger Unwrapped, which is, I guess, very soon is going to be a big hashtag, hopefully. What we are trying to do under the theme is to look at areas that we can unpack. You take tourism, for example. Our country is so beautiful, but many a times we don't see. I never knew that Akwa Ibom, for example, had the longest beachfront in West Africa. We have beautiful spaces in Enugu, Abia. We have sand dunes in Yobe. I called the governor and said, "Is it real?" He said, "Yes." But we need to get it out there in terms of the people and the places. But importantly, what is behind us unwrapping tourism? Wherever you go to a place, and I know you travel a lot, Amarachi, you eat, you buy puff-puff, you sleep in a hotel, you take a taxi. That's job for the people. And so when you begin to look at it from a development point of view, tourism unwrapped is something that we must invest in. Innovation unwrapped is something we must invest in. We as UNDP and our UN family, we are establishing, together with the government of Nigeria, establishing innovation spaces across the country. How do we unwrap these stories? And so this is something that we are excited about, and we think that Channels is a leader not only in Nigeria, but in Africa and the world, and we feel that it's a strong partnership to get the stories out there.
We're very happy to be partnering with you. Now, I find that, when we're talking about these stories, we tend to focus more on the urban areas. So people in the rural areas do feel a bit left out, some of this. Will this program also be reaching out to those in the rural areas?
I think that the ethos of what the UN stands for, quite frankly, it's leaving no one behind. And that whole universality and making sure that, where are the people who are being left behind? They are in the rural areas. They are young people. They are persons with disabilities. And those are people that we are also trying to reach. So whatever we are going to do with Channels, it's not only going to be in the urban areas. We're going to really look and catapult and cut across the entire country and make sure that we are telling the stories of everybody who matters.
You've been here in Nigeria for about a year, and it's been a very, very interesting 1 year under the new 1.5, and under the new U.S. presidency. There have been cuts made to UN agencies. How are you coping?
A number of agencies, not only UNDP, have been affected because of the cuts that we have. But I think it's always good to look at the glass half full as well, in terms of, in a times of uncertainties, we don't only have to navigate the turbulence, but we also must pivot and innovate. And what we are trying to do here, for example, is really making sure that we are partnering with the federal government very strongly, looking at domestic resources, for example. How do you leverage pension funds to be able to support your development agenda? How do you improve taxes? We have a new tax bill, for example. How do you digitalize tax processes and systems to make sure that you broaden the base and so you collect much more money to be able to invest? How do you create wealth? We just talked about tourism a moment ago. And if you do have investment in tourism, for example, more people coming from outside or even domestic tourism, you create more revenue that's able to reinvest into your development actions. We are, for example, in UNDP are looking at credit ratings. Many African countries, are rated poorly. As a result of that, they borrow at an expensive, rate than other countries do. And so some of these work is helping to really de-risk the perception and make sure that we can get more investments in. So in many ways, yes, it is affecting us, but also we are pivoting and innovating in times of this uncertainty. And I think as UNDP, we've also broadened our engagement at the state level. And it's very exciting. We have governors who are telling us that money is not the issue. Give us ideas. So it's telling us that, the days of doing projects are almost over. We have to invest in technical advisory support to our governments. We must also invest in ensuring that we can help them convene the right actors on the table through, bringing investments into the estates. We need to ensure that the public sector is much more efficient because if you're able to be able to drive your development agenda forward, you also need your public sector and your civil service to be able to function much more efficiently and effectively. So yes, we are being affected, but we also finding now innovative ways. And if you look at, for example, in the continent, we do, for example, have the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. We are spending a lot of time now seeing how then we can be able to support Nigeria to take advantage of the 1.4 billion people in Africa. It's a huge opportunity, and there's a lot of exciting work. I recently came from Aba, and I just realized that Aba produces 1 million shoes a week. How do we invest in Aba to make sure that if you're buying a Aba shoe, you feel confident about it, creating jobs for the many people, not only in Aba, but also in Nigeria, and so on and so forth. So I think it's just giving us also a different ways of doing development now, doing development unusual, and ensuring that whilst funding cuts are real, and we've lost a lot of number of staff members, but at the same time, we're also looking into the glass half full. And our Secretary General also now is leading the organization to see how best we can reposition and reinvigorate our work in times like this.
Yeah, I like the way you highlight, the different aspects of Nigeria. The Aba shoemaking thing, it's a well-known secret in Nigeria. Aba makes the best shoes and best bags and everything. So good thing you're highlighting that. And you're talking about the UN. It's marking 80 years this week. Incidentally, the General Assembly is meeting in New York. We're here monitoring from here in Channels Television as well as, right there in New York. We have our correspondents on the ground. The Secretary General did talk about, reforms in the UN. In his address, in his interview just before the UN General Assembly, he talked about the reforms that were needed. And I think the Slovenian president also highlighted those as well when she gave her address to the General Assembly. Could you talk about some of the changes the UN is actively making? Because we've talked about these reforms for a long time. Countries like Africa talking about a permanent seat at the Security Council. The Slovenian president talked about, a female secretary general and so on. And then it just seems like all of the focus is on, Europe and the Middle East and not enough on Africa. But the UN is doing something, right?
Of course, I think in terms of the UN at 80, the member states are having those conversations, and the member states are those who are all signatories to the UN. Our Secretary General also is having conversations around UN at 18, and a lot of that conversation is not only about what we have been able to achieve as a system, but also importantly, what do we need to do differently in a very changing context. And so there's a lot of conversation around, perhaps bringing much more, efficiency into the way we do business, maybe bringing some of the agencies together. But this is still work in progress that is happening, and I think that these discussions are happening with the member states. On a number of things that you're talking about in terms of reforms happening, yes, reforms have been on, and I think part of the reforms even for the UN is the fact that, in the new generation UN, we are also collectively working together as one, bringing us together in a way that we are able to move with speed, to deepen our skill and scope of work. So if you take Nigeria, for example, part of the reforms around the UN is as a country team, how do we work together? And I think these are all part of the reforms. So reforms, I think, have been taking place. They may not necessarily be something that you can end now, because as times change, you must always also pivot yourself and make sure that you are moving with the times.
Well, so 80 years on, what can we expect from the United Nations? Or what can we expect from the UNDP?
Broadly, UN has done a lot, and I think that's not the subject of the conversation now. I'll talk about UNDP and what we are doing. First of all, I want to situate our conversation within what Nigeria is doing, because Nigeria itself, it's reforming, unprecedented. We are seeing the country, promoting, for example, energy and ensuring that with the new Electricity Act 2023, states can be able to generate their own electricity. They can be able to distribute their own electricity and be able to have their own markets. Now, how are we supporting that reform? Because 60 years down the line, energy is a big issue. It's a great integrator of development. You cannot, and it's not about just lights. You cannot industrialize if you don't have power and what it takes. And so what we are trying to do with Nigeria is very exciting, Marachi. We are working with the state governments now and the federal government, not only on the integrated energy policy, but how do you roll it out on the ground, ensuring that many parts of the states can be solarized. We are helping to de-risk some of the investment that we bring in private sector, because energy is huge. It's not small money. And these are things that we are accompanying in terms of the energy transition of the country. But also reforms in the governance space is unprecedented. I mean, this country is pushing on inclusive governance. We are seeing constitutional review processes that are ongoing, including reserved seats for women. We are accompanying that as well, because 50% of this country are women, and having them on the table in terms of decision making, it's an important one. And so again, making sure that the conversations behind it, making the case, and ensuring the engagement is done is something that we are doing. Innovation is very key. There is no country that can move forward without really pivoting when it comes to the area of innovation. How do you take your ideas into prototypes? How do you take your prototypes into businesses? How do you take your businesses into industries? And one of the areas we are truly excited about is the fact that we also accompany this great country on innovation and digital. With the support of the federal government, for example, Amarachi, we are doing something that is unprecedented, and it's really exciting that we are trying to establish, what we are calling university ports, for example, in 36 states in 36 months. What are these spaces? These are spaces in universities where you can go to, and you have machines, CNC machines, robotic machines, machines that can help you with design thinking. Because our case is that you cannot wait to graduate 2 million people to come out and then start looking for jobs for them. You must create the opportunities whilst they are still there. They always say that you cannot have a Stanford without, a Silicon Valley without a Stanford. And so innovation is one of those spaces that we are increasingly working on. But also, not only at the university level, we're also talking about communities. What about, I don't know where you come from, Marashi? Abia State. Abia State, we were with the governor, Oti, the other day. He was telling us that we are seeing young people who are putting scraps together and generating electricity from that. How do we support some of this innovation at the grassroots? These are things that we are accompanying, and this is part of the reforms of this great country. We're truly excited about it. And I can go on innovation. But the SMEs is really an area that we're investing in. Nigeria has about 40 million, close to 40 million small and medium-scale enterprises. I just talked about Aba. What about Kano with our leather? Onitsha, Lagos here, Newi. There's so many. How do we turn our clusters into spaces of vibrancy where a lot of things are happening, where we're creating opportunities and jobs? So I think for us, 60 years down the line, we have achieved a lot, but we can do more. And whether in the area of energy, whether in inclusive and reimagining governance, whether it's on innovation, these are spaces that we are involved in. But trade, for me, is also a very crucial part. Trade, investments, and financing. This is going to be very, very key. If truly we can support our people to be export ready, if truly we can help, with market intelligence. Recently, we supported, and it's the first of its kind, the type that we have done that. We worked with the Ministry of Trade. We negotiated with the Uganda Airlines. We said, don't go with the belly of the A330 empty. Take things from Nigeria, but can you bring your rates down? and they agreed to bring their rates down 50%, meaning that small and medium-scale enterprises can be able to aggregate their work and be able to export at a cheaper rate, making them much more competitive. These are things that we're doing. So there's a lot of exciting work, and I think just to say some of the things that we did in the past that has struck me is on institutional building. A few weeks ago, I received the managing director, or the CEO of the Nigerian Civil Aviation Training School. He told me that UNDP established that training school 60 years ago. 80% of the pilots trained in this country train in this NCAT in Kaduna. And I didn't know about it. But these are legacies, not for UNDP, but legacies that we have supported Nigeria to achieve. So for us, I think there's a lot that I can talk about, but you know, there are a lot of things that, you know, truly excites us, and we're happy to accompany the government in these crucial times of reforms.
It's a pleasure. Elsie Attafuah, thank you for coming here to Channels Television.
Thank you very much for giving me a new name. It's I add to the repertoire. And thank you once again. I want to thank Chairman Dr. Momo for his vision. I want to thank him for the partnership with UNDP and by extension the UN family. And we look forward to really exciting times working together to support this great country. And I feel very strongly that if Nigeria makes it, Africa makes it. And there's a reason why Nigeria is called the giant of Africa. It's just not on paper. And so when we are able to do the lift, the continent is also lifted, and of course, the rest of the world benefits from it.
And this is where we end the program this week. As always, I look forward to your comments. I'm Amarachi Ubani. I'll see you next time.